work with young people from 5 to 25 in colleges, universities throughout England. I've just done a spell of storytelling in schools. So when I'm working with 16 plus to 20-year-olds, I've got another hat where I do storytelling. I come from, in terms of my work, I've developed knowledge in terms of self. I think that when you're working with young people, it doesn't matter whether they're black young people or whatever, you've got to know who you are as a person. And I think the training that I had as a youth worker was good in that I developed my own understanding of where I was going to be pitching my work with young people. And I come from a very strong African-centered approach. It doesn't matter if I'm working with a white young person. That is my approach in terms of how I work with every young person. So when I decided to work at Quorum, I'm currently working at the school Quorum Housing and Support Services. When I decided to work there, they specifically took me to do the job because they wanted someone to work with black young women. So I started working with young women who were pregnant, had their children, but also was in care. Some of them had committed offences before coming to us. The work that I do, most of the young people are referred from social services, and then they come to our organisation, and I assist in preparing them for independent living. Some of them don't reach that far because you have to be 18 years old to hold a tenancy. So when they're 18, they're expecting young people, who some of them have been in care all their lives, to hold down a tenancy at 18-year-old. And some of them don't make it. Some of them move in and they don't hold a tenancy. What I found out, there's this book which is really good. It's called Black Youth on the Margins by Ravinda Barn. And as we know, I mean, people can just generalize that in every aspect of the system, that African Caribbean young people are overrepresented in that. They're overrepresented in the care system, in the mental health system, in education. And it's no different for females, black young women. Because young black men are visible, we don't seem to concentrate on young black women. But there is a high percentage of young black women who are in custody. Most of the crimes range from shoplifting to drugs and threatening behavior. That has been on the increase. A lot of the research that has been done since 1997, and there isn't anything else that has really updated. So it needs someone to really update that, what is going on, because we don't really specifically, and I think it's a strategy or a way of trying to keep down the statistics, of really knowing. We know that African Caribbean young people are overrepresented, but we don't actually know what the figures are. So if we don't have the general figures, we will definitely not have the general figures for African Caribbean young women. The reason why I'm concentrating on African Caribbean young women, because those are the most group that come into contact in the care system. Although you do have what Africans who are refugees, and we don't have a large statistics for that. Currently I work with 3 young people who are all African, and they're refugees, and 1 African Caribbean young man. So there has been a change over the last, 2 years with refugees coming into the country. So, supporting young black women. Mary Beth Hume, 1933. The true worth of a race must be measured by the character of its womanhood. I am a black woman, tall as a cypress, strong beyond all definition, still defying places and time and circumstances. A sail imperious, indestructible, look on me and be renewed. And that's from a celebration of blackness by Maria Evans in 1994, from the book African American Poetry. Young black women living in Britain have had to face up to racism in a hostile environment which creates negative images of their race, culture and colour. Their ancestors during slavery and currently their parents have gone through the same journey and the same oppression. The continuation of eradication of our culture and the simplification of our tradition only contributes to disempower young black women and integrate them into a European culture which assists in the process of alienating them from their backgrounds. Some young black women, especially those in the care system and the prison system, have internalized these negative images and thoughts to their own detriment. For example, I have a young mixed race young woman, dual heritage young woman, who, I'll use her name as Yemi, I won't use her real name, came to me about 2-3 years ago. Her surname is Nigerian, but she didn't have any affiliation with the African side of her. She didn't even have an affiliation with the mixed race side of her. She saw herself as white. Her mother was Irish, her father half Nigerian. He grew up in the care system. Their parents came and left them in England and he was put into the care. Both parents were drug addicts and she was a heroin baby from the age of 5 years old. And that's how she went into care. And then she got abused while in residential care. When she came to me about 3 years ago, she was a very angry young woman, not knowing about herself. One of the first things that I did was to take her to a conference. It just so happens this conference was coming up about, it was an international conference for young women, black women writers, and these writers came from all over Africa and the Caribbean. When she was there, one of the things that I noticed was that everybody was introducing themselves like, I'm somebody from Dominica, I'm from Jamaica, and I expected her to say English or UK, but she said, I'm from Nigeria, and that shocked me for the simple reason that when she arrived at the project, she didn't identify with being black, let alone being mixed race. So the short period of time that she was with me, there was a start or a willingness to actually look at her identity. This young woman had taken strong substances, but she wasn't one of the young women who had actually committed any crime or offense. Her offense was actually taking drugs, using drugs, and being extremely angry, needing therapy. It is important that anyone who is working to support the development of young black women start from the understanding of the knowledge they hold. In order to pass on effective teaching or training, you have to be aware of the history, background, and environment which young black women come from. You have to start with their perspective, their experiences, and their fears. Only then you can enable young black women to celebrate the journey, to celebrate their blackness. In doing so, you can only strengthen the links between blackness as a part of self, and in turn strengthen and embrace their own communities. I believe that when you're working with young black women in care, I'm sure everybody's heard the proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Oh, sorry. It takes a village to raise a child. So basically, I think in a lot of situations where we have young black people per se in care, workers do not introduce those young people to the community, and that is where they fail, and that is where you have young black people getting angry or not having any contact. They don't have contact with their parents, but they don't have any contact with their communities either. So for me, that is quite dangerous. Sister Nefertiti Stewart Kamara, the chairperson of the Science Consortium in the USA, stated in the Rites of Passage Conference in London, April 1996, on melanin, that black melanin and the black child, that the disassociation from self means being disconnected from ourself and our souls. We must take responsibility for our own thoughts and our own actions. For many young black women, the ability to feel whole seems far away. This is because they are made to feel less than other women of their own peers. They feel confused and abused and harbor very low self-esteem. To address these issues, we must first have to look at the key factors that affect their lives and how to readdress the imbalance. If we start from the premise that young black women should be listened to and guided by adults, we then have to put this into context of a black perspective and what all of this means to the above. For young black people living and growing in present British society today, what does it mean for the physical and psychological environment and structures that surround them? To address the issue of supporting young black females through childhood to womanhood, we first have to look at the political situation faced by black people living in England. We have to understand the best way to provide an adequate base, an environment to enable them to enable the transitional period to take place from being a child to being an adult. Black people arriving in England during the 50s and 60s, and I said that this paper was written in 1996. We know that black people's been here since the 13th century. But our parents, my parents, arriving in the 50s and 60s, had always played the guest status. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Over the years, this has changed, mainly to do with their experience and the fact that their children have been influenced by the host culture and their peers. Young people use their parents as their first role model when growing as children. That quickly changes when they enter adulthood. Then they start to fashion their aspirations and their own sense of identity, sometimes strongly dictated by their peers. As they're growing up, they have different reflections of their mother by different people. They see their mothers as housewives, lone parents, breadwinners, career women, battered women, and ultimately the ultimate stereotype of being the strong and versatile woman to withstand all these various experiences. On the other hand, black fathers are seen as husbands, breadwinners, uninvolved in the growth and nurturing of their children, disciplinarians, criminals, drug peddlers. With these negative forces slapped on our families, it is easy to see difficult tasks we have in raising our black children from manhood, raising our black children to manhood or womanhood. But because of such forces, it is vital and essential to provide our children with the right kind of nurturing by taking them through the process of childhood to adulthood. Adolescent black girls must wonder what becoming a female is all about. Mary Lewis says that it's daunting because they are driven to some extent by biology and the approach and the onset of fertility. Menstruation marks the beginning of womanhood. I gave up some youth for knowledge, but my gain was more valuable than my loss. That was Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Cage Birds Sing, 1970. Maya Angelou's words gives us significant clues to the stage of life, though it's both difficult and necessary. There are many developing self of the black female. Mary Lewis asked some black females the question by conducting a questionnaire. Some of the responses were as follows. The question she asked was, what is it that is unique to the black female? Mary Lewis, there was a 12-year-old young woman, said, you have to act like a woman to be with women. A 14-year-old says, women are a lovely human being. 16-year-old, a very important part of the human society. 11-year-old, a female is pretty, she can get pregnant. There are many issues relating to the needs of young black women, but in this short paper I shall focus on the following key points: identity, positive image, influences, health, sexuality, spirituality, education, and relationships. Identity. Although identity is applicable to all races in terms of self-development, it is important that young black women are given support in developing positive identity. As a child grows older, learning black history and experiencing pro-black culture, it will engender them in a sense of pride, and this will provide an inner strength and broaden their sense of identity. I mean, the argument is, in the care system, is that you can place a young black child in a white household, and as long as that child is loved and, you know, taken care of, that child can grow and, you know, be healthy or whatever. I don't believe that. I don't believe that you can place a child, no matter. It's good for a child to be loved. We know that love is the base. But how can you come up in a world where, you know, racism is endemic and you're going to place beautiful black child in a white household where there isn't anything which relates to that child? Unless that white parent, even that white parent giving certain of that culture, they can't give that culture, right, in terms of a black family or a black community. And I have a personal experience of that where my daughter's sister was brought up by a white family. My daughter was brought up by me. And when she discovered her adopted sister, because she searched for her adopted sister, who was in a white household, some of the experiences on the journey that my daughter had been through with others in the community, because as a parent, as a lone parent, I didn't just raise my daughter. I made sure the community, or the African community that I was involved, helped to raise my daughter. This young woman didn't have that same experience. And so therefore, when she came into our household, it was like her having to start from scratch. Yes, she had the love. Yes, she had the economics. But the most, you know, the most important ingredient, which is self, which is attached to soul, she did not have that. And that, for me, is what makes you who you are. And if that is lost, if that is not there, what is that doing to young black women and young black men in the care system? We have to, you know, ask what you know, they don't even have to be in the care system. They can, if they're in a family that is not giving them that, a black family that is not giving them that, that is just as, you know, damaging. However, if the transition that takes place from being a girl to being a woman leaves out black identity, young black women will lose out the initial ingredients in their growth. It is important and imperative for all working to support young black women to have an understanding and knowledge of the definition of black. What does black mean for the individual person living or born in Britain? It is important that young black women define what blackness means for them in order of self-exploration. They first have to feel positive about being black. One has to embrace oneself. This statement is very difficult to adapt for any culture group, but it is doubly difficult for black people overall. This is due to negative stereotypes we encounter on a daily basis. We see offensive stereotypes of black people every day in films, television shows, advertisement, books. We hear misuse of black language, black death, black male, black demon, as opposed to white as snow, pure and white. We hear derogatory statements made. Such insults can make it difficult to feel good about ourselves. Black young people are especially vulnerable to such images and negative verbal messages. Darky, Negro, Wog, Coloured, Half-caste, Afro, Paki, Coolie, Sunshine, and these words are still around and they're still being used. Therefore, young black women have to learn how to surround themselves with positive mechanisms to combat negative stereotypes. It is essential that young black women try to protect themselves from derogatory statements that's causing them to collude and internalize their pain and hurt. Contact with family, friends and partners can also act as a positive reinforcement. They need support and infrastructures to guide them in self-discovery. They also need to be encouraged to learn about their ancestors and their history in order to mature. They need their heroes and sheroes for them to pass on their essential education to others they come into contact with to enable empowerment. When I went to do storytelling in school for the last month, one of the things I found, my mother's dead now, but I bless her for, is that she always sang me traditional songs from Jamaica. And I found out that most of these schools who have black children, young black children, didn't know any traditional songs. They know Baba, Black Sheep, they know, you know, the usual wind the bobbin up and all that sort of thing, but they did not know any traditional songs, and they're coming out of black households. So how do we pass on the culture to the next generation? It's absolutely, for me, it's absolutely damaging. It's damaging, completely damaging to our race. And I think it's, you know, when I go back to the point where I was saying about a black child being brought up in a white household, yeah, when basically half of our tradition, half of our culture is not being taught and it's not being passed on. And that includes our languages, you know. So it's important that we teach what we know, and that if we don't, we get the information, because the information is there. Black women have some black women have a low self-esteem. Black women in the care system and black women who are estranged from any contact with the black community. Dr. Jocelyn Maxime stated at the Rites of Passage conference in April 1993, "You can't teach what you don't know." Young black women might not know how to go about this journey of self-discovery. Black parents might not know. Staff in residential institutions might not know. Staff in prison settings might not know. Dr. June A. Ferrer, a former worker of the organisation I work for, she now is head of psychology at St. Thomas's, states in a journal on Black Therapy, 1995, an article on racial identity and African people's mental health. The issue of identity for people of African descent in the diaspora is central to the issue of their social and political empowerment, as well as to the issue of psychological well-being. In addressing the well-being of young Black women, we are providing the opportunity for them to explore their identity, but it's also starting the process of breaking those barriers down and addressing the real issue of race, culture, in order to build the true knowledge of self. Positive images. Positive images is about representation of self. One of the things I really dislike is not seeing images, positive images of Black families on billboards. Not seeing positive images, and this is where, you know, Black women's self-esteem comes into question, of just a Black man and a Black woman embracing or being loving, or usually when you see these Benetton adverts, you have a Black man and a white woman, you know, you have maybe a Black woman and a white man, but you do not see a Black woman and a Black man. And that for me is damaging. What is that saying? Is that saying that we are estranged from each other? We don't care about each other? You know, and if that is happening in terms, and that's a powerful, powerful image, yet in Black communities like Tottenham, where we have so-called, in inverted commas, Black and Black violence, we get someone like, I can't remember the rap artist, whether it's Ludacris or whatever, in this bowler hat with a gun. This is a massive billboard, a gun in his hand and a bowler hat and a bow tie with a gun pointing. Now that is supposed to be seen as advertising that artist, and supposed to be seen as a positive image, which is extremely damaging image in any Black community. So those images goes on, and I think the television plays lip service to try to improve images by introducing, but they haven't gone far enough. For instance, they use our music, but they still do not provide the images. Yeah. Positive images about representation of self in birthday cards, Christmas cards, churches, television, toys, etc. In the past, young Black women have been denied this opportunity through a lack of resources and material which reflects their image and cultural backgrounds. In inner London, there have been a growing move to provide more positive resources through libraries, bookshops, and educational establishments. There is also various books to aid and assist in working with young Black women on positive images. Growing Up Black, a resource manual for Black youth by Makeda Silver, is a useful tool. Her Story, Black Female Rites of Passage by Mary Lewis, Raising Black Children by J. Corner and A. Poisson Plume books. So the resources exist now. Resources exist for all of us in the bookshops. We just have to know where to go to buy them, because a lot of the white bookshops still does not, they stock safe materials, safe novels. You know, the stuff that we should be reading are not in the places where they should be. Yeah? So we need to go to those bookshops. In some parts of Britain, materials and resources such as these are difficult to come by. Also, there are no Black staff in residential settings for Black young women. It is necessary to build up a network of Black resources and Black contacts. For instance, if you're living in somewhere like Somerset, Taunton, how many Black people do you think you have in that area to work with young black people? Literally none. So it comes back to my original thing about black young people in white environment. So it's important that, you know, black suppliers, black book suppliers distribute their material as far as field as possible, because black people do live there. They do live in Scotland, they do live in Ireland, and they need to have these resources. It is necessary to provide a black network and resources regardless of the physical distance. Young black women separated from living within a black community needs at some stage of their lives to experience the feeling of being a part of a black community, sharing in its failures as well as its successes. Sometimes assumptions are made and not the right training given, or a total miseducation of the true facts. The question must be asked, where does one find information? How should it be used supporting black women through a training program? Through practice to enable parents and practitioners alike in tackling the issues of positive empowerment around a black perspective with young black women. Apart from a number of book lists in this paper, there are a range of African bookshops in Britain, black organizations working with black young women. Like, for instance, we have the Pan-Africanist Youth Group now, which consists of both black young women and black young men. And they are been talking on radio stations like Galaxy. They've run 3 conferences now, and they've talked about the difficulties that African, Caribbean and African from the continent face in, you know, in this system. So it's important to organize and get involved. There's also black agencies, individual black people with the knowledge, black practitioners in the field working with black young women. Black young women should be supported in making links with these agencies. Young black women need positive affirmation as well as positive images. Affirmation works by changing their thinking, which changes their feelings and behavior. Black young women brought up in a total white community are isolated from anything black except themselves. Experiencing racism but not knowing may have a detrimental effect on their upbringing. They may develop a self-loathing and self-hatred attitude, which sometimes lead to self-destruction. And by this I mean that there's something called scrubbers. Has anybody heard of scrubbers? There's black young people who live outside of London in residential care who try to bleach themselves, yeah? But we have them in London because we have black women over the age of 20 who are not in care, who are scrubbing themselves and who are using bleaching cream to become whiter.
Not just women, men.
Sorry?
Not just women, men are.
I know, but because I'm talking about black women, but yes, I agree with you. The men are doing it, but black women are doing it in their drugs. From the continent, from the Caribbean. It's a very, 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 very sad state of affair. When our mental state of mind says to us that we have to scrub ourselves or bleach ourselves to get rid of the color of our skins. Black parents, residential staff, white carers working with black women in care need to counteract negative thinking and address self-loathing and self-destruction by providing a nurturing environment and positive images. Black parents and black residential staff working with black women in care also have a duty to challenge miseducation of a black perspective, but they also might not be aware themselves of the history. Negative thinking only begets negative action. We can choose to give energy only to positive thoughts. Influences. Young black people have had to deal with many conflicting images and representation of themselves. The media, in its many guises, plays a most negative role in informing and influencing black young women in British society. Young black women are rarely seen in the media when they are portrayed in the most derogatory way. And we can see that on that, is it MTV base? Because I don't really watch a lot of television, where they're whining, you know, that kind of thing that our young people are subjected to, you know, as well as young men are subjected to that. Some aspects of westernized fashion sends the wrong signals to our young black women. It encouraged them to aspire to look more mature and be objects of sexual desire. Some critics would say that a woman has the right to choose what she wears, how she looks, and how she acts. However, the question must be asked, is there a real choice, and what choice do they have? For some people in British society will view young black women with their own personal standards of beauty in terms of their hair and their clothes and what they wear. Musical groups such as Soul to Soul, Arrested Development, and the Fugees have helped to redefine fashion from a black perspective, affording black young women positive fashion alternatives. Another main influence in young black women's lives have been the corruption and the direct attack on women in music. And these come from some of them come from young black men themselves, talking about the women in a very, very negative light. And some of these women internalize those negative things, talking about their personal parts, talking about them has been difficult, talking about them as being bad mothers, talking about them as bitches and hoes, etc., etc., etc. And that's just an ongoing thing, and that needs to be really just cut out the music, full stop. Certain rappers and DJs and musical industry as a whole has to take on responsibility for their action of using negative messages against women to sell music. Some of the artists who have been instrumental in this onslaught against young black women have been young black men supported by the white musical establishment who gain economical gratification from this activity. We've had a recent thing about black artists being banned from this country for talking about homosexuals in a very negative light. Can you tell me one black artist who's been banned from this country about talking about black women in a negative light? Can anybody tell me? No? Right. So, there is a one rule for one thing and one rule. So we can talk, you can talk negatively about being gay and having a gay relationship and having gay, negative gay lyrics in the music. But when you start talking about a sister, a queen, somebody who's, a part of yourself, yeah, industry, the society, the media, doesn't see anything wrong with that. So just really go back and reflect on that and see basically what we're doing to each other, Young black men have emulated the stereotypical view of themselves mirrored by Western society, racist and sexist practices. However, some black women internalize these negative and derogatory messages, thus turning around and owning them and responding with the same negative message in their music, speech, dress and action. So we can't always lay it at the brother's door because the women do take it on and they sing it, they dance it and they act it. Black families, black organisations and practitioners should be working together towards eradication of these negative practices which can only harm our young black people and destroy their sense of being and purpose. They have to try and provide a positive and achievable alternative. Before I continue, has anybody got anything to say? Because I'm aware that I'm chatting and I'd like you to come in, yeah.
I'm just a little bit confused when you said that you raised up one daughter but her sister was raised up somewhere else.
Sorry, say that again.
I was a little confused when you said you raised up one daughter and And your sister was raised in a white family?
Yes, that was on her father's side.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Her father's side, yeah.
What's the date on the paper that you're reading from, please?
1996.
Haven't you got anything more recent?
I think a lot of what is in here reflects what is happening now. I don't think it's outdated. I don't think, a lot of the, as I said, the key data, this was done in 1997, and they did this, which is a Black Child Report, which was also done in 1997. So when I gathered information, a lot of my paper fits into the research that was happening around at that particular time.
So after 1997, nothing else has been written on this subject?
There's various different things have been written in terms of basically, which reflects around identity, but doesn't necessarily reflect about black young people in care. Yeah, there hasn't been any, you know, they talk about young people in care per se, be them black or white, but there hasn't been anything really done about young black people in care. And if anybody's going to do it, it will be this woman called Ravinda Byrne, and Barn, who wrote this in 1997. And she gives an up-to-date statistic from then, but not now. Any other
Can I
questions?
ask another question? You see, with this bleaching that you're talking about,
Yeah.
what do you think the reason behind it is?
I think it's exactly what I've said in my paper. That's why I'm saying that doesn't go out of fashion. It's because of a hate for ourselves, really. And basically, I have a very strict, you know, I don't believe that everybody should, you know, follow one strain of thought. But at the same time, what is important, and what I tell my children, I tell the children that the young people that I work with, it's about how they deal with themselves as black young people, you understand? So basically, I think the whole aspect of bleaching is an onslaught on self. And if it's like, for instance, black people are not supposed to really drink milk, cow's milk, because we are lactose by nature, we are lactose intolerant, yeah? Which causes asthma, eczema, yeah? And various different things that we eat, like McDonald's or Kentucky. And I know you probably all do this because you're students and it's easy to pick up, right? But we're not supposed to eat some of these things, yeah? But we do it. That is another destruction of self, yeah? So if you're destroying yourself, you're shooting each other, you're bleaching your skins, you're eating McDonald's and Kentucky. The society doesn't have to do very much to you, really. It's a slow process of destruction, really. It's a process, I see it as a slow process of dying, you know, killing oneself off. And I'm not joking, I'm very, very, very serious about this. Extremely serious about this.
Isn't that the process, all these processes that you're describing,
Yeah.
are they not the processes of refinement of a very sophisticated system?
Yes, I think you're right. It is a process of a sophisticated system, but we don't have to play in that, yeah? Just like we don't have to sit down and you know, for instance, we don't have to call ourselves a black man calling himself ludicrous. You know, how weird is that? You know, these labels we put, that's another thing that we do. We self-destruct by calling ourselves these negative names, really negative names, ludicrous, you know. So we're idiots, we're fools, we kill ourselves, we bleach ourselves, and we destroy our internal system. And I think that is you know, we might sit down here and you might hear me talking about, this is how I talk to the young people that I work with. I go through these processes with them, yeah. I have a young woman who is 18 years old, and she is from Eritrea, and she came with her natural hair. She suffers from I've seen a case like that before. She suffers from dermatology, eczema in her scalp. Now, I suffer from eczema, but I've never had that in my scalp because I've never straightened my hair or anything like that. She had to stop. She straightened her hair because she wanted to look more beautiful. She had to stop it. She can never straighten her hair again because she suffers from this eczema in the middle of her head. And when it starts, it covers the whole head. That's just an extreme example. I'm not saying for everybody to stop straightening hair. I've never straightened my hair. My hair is natural. But what I'm saying is that for me, I see it as a destructive practice. Yeah? Why can't I be happy with my own self-image? What is wrong with our image? And what is that saying to any children that we have and we take responsible for?
Why do white people hate black people?
That's another argument. I think that it's not. I don't think that some white people might hate black people, but that's a different discussion. What I'm really reflecting on now is, and this is what we do sometimes when we come together.
No, I require an answer from you, because if you can answer that question.
I don't believe that all white people hate.
Well, predominantly the majority of them.
I believe that it is the whole infrastructure, yeah?
And who works infrastructure?
Yeah, white supremacy. We live in a white supremacy system. It doesn't really, we live in a white supremacy system.
Because that's where the answer lies.
Yeah. And so therefore, if we have a white supremacy system, that white supremacy system is controlled. And so therefore, some of us are like puppets. But when we take control of our lives, when we start taking control of our lives and what we're doing, what we say, how we eat, how we look after ourselves, then basically that can change. But if we're not willing to change and just go along with what everybody else is doing, then we'll be in the same, we'll be doing the same thing over and over again. And I believe that to have change, we have to start. Because some of us is 30, 20, and it's really, really difficult for that change to happen, My son has been through every aspect of the system, yeah? And he is 20 years old. He's been in prison, he had a mental breakdown this summer. He's been in care, he's been in special needs. He's at university now doing politics and media, and that's because I've had to fight for him to not remain in a system and to come out of the system. And I've had to fight various different things. I've had to fight drugs, I've had to fight image, I've had to, just to fight literally everything. In eating kebabs, just everything. So basically, I think that it's easier when you're working with young people who are 16 plus and younger, because then you can help to give them a sense of belonging. And when you don't have a sense of belonging, not all of us can afford to go to the Caribbean or go to Africa. I've just been fortunate that as a mother, I have taken my children to Africa and I've taken my children to Caribbean, because I think that is part of their learning, yeah? But not all parents economically can do that. But there is resources and tools that we can use in shaping young people or preventing them from going into the care system. Because I have been working in the care system for 19 years, and I would not like anyone's child to be in that system, although I'm working in there, yeah? Because it's a very, very, very destructive process.
Yeah, I was impressed when you said that young lady said that she was Nigerian when you took her to that conference.
That's right.
But I'm not sure if she looked upon you as a mother figure or she looked upon you as a mentor, but that's what's missing in the black society, the mentors, the mentees.
I think that most of my young people, I can't help it. I mean, most of my young people look on me like a mother because I have that maternal instinct because I've been in the childcare field so long. So I've had how do I measure success in terms of the work that I do work with young black women and young black men. The way I measure my success is by them coming back to me 2 or 3 years later and saying to me, I had a young man who was schizophrenic, didn't receive any support from his mother. He came to me and was with me for about 2 years. He had to leave the project because he tried to abuse a young woman because he had mental health issues. While he was with me, I took him through, used various resources in taking him through various black perspectives. But one of the things I did for him was take him to an alternative therapist, because I believe that a lot of our young people, they need therapy, but they can't just go to any therapist or any counselor. So I took him to a sister who did SRT and looked in different ways of working with his spirituality. And about a couple of years ago, he came back to me. He still had some mental health problems, but he was more functional and could talk. And he came back to me and said, I have to see you because I wanted to thank you for what you did to me. And that's all, that was all that, you know, it made me feel good about that. But what I'm saying is that I think that a lot of us do not want to put in the work and the time to support. And I think what the community needs is that some of us are basically too occupied with what we're doing, and some of us are mentors within ourselves. And you can do peer mentoring with each other within the university, or you can go, and there's a lack of black mentors for young black men, you know, and there's generally a lack of black mentors per se. And I'm sure everybody in this room could be a black mentor to someone, yeah? There's young black people out there who need you and need your expertise and your experience. And it's not just about me coming here and talking to you, it's about you using your knowledge and your wisdom and what you have to pass on to young people so they can come and use the education as a key, as my son did. He had a Pan-Africanist community who worked with him when he was in the mental institution and they were going to section him. It was 4 brothers who came up there and took it out of my hands and dealt with it. So what I'm saying is that it's the proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, is a very, very important proverb. And it is important to realize that that village is right outside. It might be in London, it might be in Bristol, it might be in Birmingham, but they're there. Yeah? And you are a part of that village. And so it's your responsibility to, you know, act. Yes?
Please. How we know hiding from the real issues when we do not attack the fundamental problem? Which I asked you that question.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people don't want to go there when they like to be moderate and they don't like to paint everybody with the same brush, so to speak. But I can tell you the reason why white people don't like black people is because of the melanin, their skin.
Yeah, but you see, the time we take to worrying about what white people are saying and doing, we have a lot of education.
Well, we're not worrying about it. What I'm saying is, right, if we hide from that very fundamental issue, right, and become moderates or try to be moderates, we are going to miss the opportunity in talking about all the other side issues which never get to the root of the problem, which is this self-hate. Now, we have been projected, it's been projected to us by the stereotyping of monkeys, orangutans, swinging the trees, jungle bunnies, all that type of thing. The dictionary definitions of black, but yet you don't hear them pushing hue as pertaining to colour, or those of colour, to show that to have colour is normal and to have a deficiency of color is abnormal. So that abnormality has gone out into society and affected the mindsets of even our own black people when they come to believe that to be white is right and you're black, you stay at the back. So this is what I'm saying. Are we it's like the women's issue. Are we not weakening the whole effect of trying to combat racism by segregating the women's problems separately? We know you have your problems, but that was there before.
No, we're not segregating them, because basically what we're saying is that, and I really want to put the white issue to the side because we know it's there. We know we're in a white supremacist. What I'm talking about is we as self and we as people.
But if you don't know what ails you.
But that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about what can we do, yeah, as African peoples, and I prefer to use that than black and West Indian or whatever. What can we do as African people, yeah, to develop our own self-awareness of certain issues that affect us in this society? And one of the main things is our children, yeah, because they're in the cemeteries. A lot of them are in the cemeteries right now. The brother at the back, sorry, I'll come to you. The brother at the back.
Yeah, I noticed, off the subject a bit, you said something about the way young black women in general dance. You weren't happy with it. But is that not one of the few things that we carry from African?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I'm a dancer myself,
So
right? Hang on a minute. It wasn't the issue of how they dance. That's not an issue. I've been to Nigeria and seen fellow women dancing all over the place. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the issue. It's what is portrayed in MTV. You understand what I'm saying? With someone like, it's only a ludicrous minute, but it's in one of those rappers with the gold chains and everything and having the babes thing. For me, that is a negative image, yeah? If we're having young black women dancing to celebrate something or dancing to enjoy themselves, but not to prop up this, rappers' machinery and have other young black men think that is the way that you inspire to upward mobility, yeah? That's different, yeah? It's not about the dance. We know that they have natural energy and there's thousands of dances in Africa which all have a meaning, ceremonial meaning.
Yeah.
But we don't know that. Maybe they're doing a dance and a step and a whatever on these MTV, and they don't even know that they're doing a very important ceremonial dance.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the language that we speak. Yeah?
Yeah.
We speak or we say certain things within, I say Jamaican language. I don't say patois, I say Jamaican language. Yeah? Or Dominican language or St. Vincent language, right? We might say certain things, and that strand of that particular language is African in sounding, or French in content, or English in content. Mm-hmm. You understand? But it comes from many different collaboration of languages. And we're saying certain things which might have been said in Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, or Swahili. Mm-hmm. And we don't even know what we're saying. You see? So basically, it's about having that understanding. Once you get that understanding and that empowerment from having that understanding, then you'll be richer in thought.
No, I had to okay.
Brother,
yeah, my question is not exactly to you, it's to this gentleman over here.
Yeah.
When did you come to the realization that it was white supremacy that's holding us down?
When?
Yeah.
I can answer that question.
No, I'm asking this gentleman here.
I'll come back to you, brother.
My point is what I'm trying to ask is like right now, I'm not sure how old you are, yeah, but the generations which are kind of generally in here are thinking of new ways to tackle the problems that we're facing, yeah. This white supremacy thing and this melanin thing has been around for for how long? It's nothing new. but nothing is moved on, even with this knowledge that I'm sure the majority of us know in here. I think the only people that are not fully aware of what the points that you're making are these two children that's, you know, side by side of you. There's no point in trying to ask the sister over there questions that our past leaders couldn't even answer or even deal with. And it's just stagnating us, yeah, in our growth, just to go over old ground, which right about now, like the guy who was here last week was saying, we're next for Black Power, as in it's up to our generation and the generations that follow us to move on and to find new solutions to our problems. It's no point going over it.
That's right. And
Do
you know
you
what?
know what ails you? That's the problem.
Yeah, but you know, do you know what happens when we start a conversation like this, when we're dealing with us? I've come here to deal with young black women in the care system. When we start, I'm sorry, I have to use that. Whitey creeps in, yeah, and then it becomes a destructive situation. In larger gatherings than this, since I was a youth worker, I'll go to a gathering and I'm teaching something or I'm talking about something. And I'm talking about us. And this has been going on for years. So when you said about the material, it's relevant, right? And then all of a sudden, an issue about whitey comes in. And then it just stopped the progress. What we've got to do is, we know we're in a white supremacy system. This is the time now for us to basically sort out our situation. As the symmetries are going to get bigger, we have to talk about it, sort out our situation. Stop the bleaching. You know, become mentors. You say, what can we do? Join organization, become mentors, yeah? To young black men in Hackney on the streets. I can do it. I can do it. I don't have no fear of those brothers out there. Did anybody see recently a film called, a documentary called The Trouble with Black Men?
I missed it. I heard it.
Yeah, has anybody here seen it?
Solomon.
Oh my, yeah. Yeah. Basically, my son took part in that film.
Which one was your son?
The
The
second
big
part.
afro.
The second
Yeah.
part.
No, it's the first film. Yeah.
That was your son?
Yeah. My son took part in that film. It was at the same time he had a mental breakdown and they wanted to come into my house. I happened to be in there and I said to him, I don't want to have nothing to do with these people because as far as I'm concerned, they're not going to represent us. But he wouldn't listen to me.
Your son was hugely taken advantage of on that program.
Sorry?
I said your son was hugely taken advantage of on that program.
Absolutely.
I personally worked on that program,
Yes.
and when I heard about the final edit, they wouldn't allow any of the people
Absolutely.
to watch the
Absolutely.
while it was
Yeah.
being edited,
Absolutely.
and the final edit that went out,
Yeah.
it was like totally against like half the people who was working on it. And me personally, I called out myself on it. I didn't want my name associated
Yeah,
with anything.
absolutely.
And when I saw what was there, like there was like a big uproar in the black community,
That's right. That's
you
right.
know, and the
And
characters that
And
was
it
there.
was, and they led it. Who was at the top of it? Who was the head of it? Who was the directing it or whatever? It was a black man. It was a black man who had turned round about 4 or 5 years ago and said that he prefers white women to black women because black women are this and that and that and that. So we have to be careful about what we're getting into and who we get, you know, who is a part of that system. And then another thing that the film took on was that the fact is that some of the members in it, you see, this is where we're talking about the village now. If I wasn't a part of this village, I wouldn't have known certain things that was on that program. But majority of young men who took part in that program, I knew them. I knew them in terms of friendship, or seeing them at a party or a christening and a wedding. Our community is not that large that we can't see these people. And one of the things they did was that there was a young man in there who had a hood over his head. Yeah? And they were saying that it was my son's best friend. Now, they reflected on this young man as if he didn't come from nowhere, he never had no family, he never had no grandparents. His uncle was a lawyer, not just a a lawyer, he's a barrister. But the film never reflected that. And then they asked the question, where are the, and he's the same age as my daughter who's 34, where is the young black men who are aspiring? What did they do? Was to go and find a young black man who is gay and said that this, why is it that this man is inspiring? But that same young black man with the hood on Broadwater Farm, his uncle was a barrister. So basically, going back to what I was saying about the media and adverts, they miseducate our minds, they confuse our minds. And so it's important, I'm glad you asked a question about fact and figure, because it's important that we have fact. It's important that we know what is fact from what is untrue. And that program covered a lot of untruths. Yeah? There was another brother who was supposedly a crack addict, who was poor and living in Brixton and he never know. I know his mother personally. His mother is one of the mothers for Jimmy Cliff. She has lots of money. She just chose to leave and go home. Her son is a very intelligent boy. He just chose that he wanted to go and experiment, like many young people who experiment. But the program didn't tell you that. His mother actually went to St. Martin's Art College and she did a film in the black community on domino games. The film didn't tell you that, did it? So it's important, the brother is quite right, you check out what you get involved in. And it was only after the program that my son was shaking his head and he said, Mommy, I shouldn't have got involved, but he had to make that choice himself. So it's important, when I'm telling you about the guidance that we have, and I went up to the BBC and I dealt with them, and they dealt with me as if I was, you know, they could patronize me, and I made sure I took members of the village up there to deal with them. Subsequently, my son was in the film for 4 weeks, a whole month, and they shot only 8 minutes of him, because they realized that they had someone to reckon with. So I think we, as a race of people, there's a lot of work that we have to do on ourselves. And in able to do that, we have to take on responsibility. We either have to join organizations, or we have to become mentors, or you can peer mentor someone in your university. Yeah? Rather than sitting there and talking about nothing. Pair up and talk about what are you going to do next. Yeah? Are you going to join a reparations movement? Are you going to join an organization that looks out for young black men on the streets? They might need a support or need a mentor in Hackney, because there's plenty of them who need a mentor. And it's important because you all have something valuable. You started because you're here, so you have something valuable to do. My son is doing it. Last week he ran and he said, guess what, I'm going to do what you do. I'm going to be a mentor. I was happy because he's actually lived the experience. So that's what people need to do, and that's why I've been working with young people for over 33 years, yeah, as well as doing my poetry, because I believe that they're the generation that's coming up who needs that support. And if we can prevent a brother, a sister from getting into the mental health system, because you know the laws on that is changed now. And they basically, whereas my son had a social worker and a doctor to assess him, they don't do that no more. They can just section you. And what, by the time they section you and have in there, what kind of medication do you think they're giving you inside there?
I think so. That question for the brother question still stands.
Sorry, I didn't.
You know the question that brother gave to you.
Yeah.
I feel so that question still stands, because if you don't know who you are, where you come from, you don't know your future.
We're not talking at cross purposes.
No.
What he was talking about is that how much the white man hate us.
Not how much.
No, because we talk about the system.
Yeah.
And where's that system? It's the white man lands. When I say white man lands, I said all the world.
Yeah, but we're not going to jump on Biwi or jump on Air Jamaica and or leave this country. There's a lot of people who are going to stay here. And as I said, it's about using the resources and mechanisms that are, because people have a right to be here if they want to be here. It's about using the resources and mechanisms that we have in this country.
How?
Yeah? Instead of supporting McDonald's, and I'm going down that line because it's economics, instead of supporting McDonald's and Kentucky, we go and support somebody who's giving us nutritious food. Aki, saltfish, patty, whatever, callaloo. Those are the, that is going to nurture us and sustain us, yeah? Because if we're not nurtured and sustained, yeah, then we cannot basically have the energy to do anything. So I haven't got time to sit down, brother, really, and worry about the system. I know that it's there. What I do is I act, because we can sit here and talk. We can listen to wonderful lecturers, yeah, coming from this place and that place. But if we're not prepared to be a part of that struggle, because that's what I'm talking about here today, yeah? I'm actually in the struggle, the work that I'm doing. I've been in there for 33 years, yeah? And because I think the way that I do, and I come from a very, very focused African perspective, my organization, they say I chat black too much. A brother came to me and said to me, can't you talk about anything else? And I had to ask myself, and not going to say who he is. He's a brother who's doing valuable work, but when he came to me and tell me, can't I talk about anything else? Because when I go into my organization and I see a sea of white people who are head of departments, all the black people are working in the field, quote, plantation, doing the hard work, yeah? He is trying to tell me that I must talk about something else.
My respects to you, but you even dealt with some of the issues that I'm talking around when you actually mentioned the lactose allergy that 66% of all people, African people, have. And not only that, the foods as well. So, if we move from the issue of melanin, we're moving away from our health, from our livelihood, from our liberty. And this is why we're envied and hated so much. And this is why I'm saying, if we know this and know the reason, we can develop all those systems that you and all of us here need to advocate, and not only just food, but the music we listen to. Telling our children about where they're coming from. Rather than being just here and what we're going to do being just here now. You have to reflect. You have to know where you're coming from. You have to know how your body is made up, how your history. That is so vital. And it's so vital to know also the whereabouts of all the other nations and how they feel being derivatives of the original McCoy. And the Europeans, the Anglo-Saxon, he doesn't like it. He dislikes even the American writer, Mark Twain. His description of Moby Dick pertaining to the white skin. It tells you. So if we know all these things, we understand then that the majority of the Caucasian have an inherent dislike of themselves, and therefore will dislike you. If you don't dislike yourself, how are you going to like anyone else if you don't dislike yourself?
Of course, but the fact is that we spend too much energy on that, and we don't deal with our own self in terms of our own self-awareness. What I'd like to do, I'm sorry I couldn't bring any handouts, but I have a book list here, but I want to first give you, if you've got pen and paper, some of the bookshops around the place that you can get resources from, yeah? There's New Beacon Bookshop. Does people know New Beacon Bookshop in Stroud Green Road?
What area is that?
That's in Finsbury Park. Yeah? New Beacon Bookshop, that's Stroud Green Road, which is Finsbury Park is the nearest station, and that's N4. Yeah? There's Head Start Books and Craft on West Green Road, and that's in Tottenham, that's N15.
Sorry, can you start again, please?
Yeah. There's New Beacon Bookshop. Yeah. Which is in Stroud Green Road, and that's in N4. There's Head Start Books and Crafts. They've been there for ages. I'm sure most of you might know. It's in West Green Road, and that's London N15. And that's 0208 802 9623. There's Pepper Kai Books, and I know Pepper Kai came to, I don't know if anybody was here when Pepper Kai came to talk.
Last 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Pepper Kai Books, and he's 0208 801 0205, and he has one of the largest African book distribution in this country. Most book outlets go and get their books from him.
Where is it?
Yeah. He's based in Tottenham. Yeah. You've got his phone number, and he's just got books upon books, and he's actually going to build a centre. I'm going to help him. One of the things I'm going to help him to do is to build a centre for young black men in care. I know I've been talking about young black women, so I go from one to, but build a house.
Inseparable.
Yeah. So, no, you see, brother, I believe that sometimes, as an a brother had an initiation ceremony two weeks ago, 19-year-old brother, right? And he had to do all of that rites of passage stuff on his own as a black man, and he had black men surrounding him. And I believe that young women have to do the same thing. There needs to be more rites of passage programs for young black women in this country. So basically, we need sometimes in Africa, you know, you have that initiation ceremony, and we need to do that so we come together when we've gone through that process of education and enlightenment.
You start cooking. That's why we are coming together.
We have Mama Africa Culture Shop, right? And they're based on 282 High Road, Leighton. And that's E10. And their telephone number is 0208 539 2154. So there's no reason for you, and most of those shops. Sorry?
Yeah.
Sorry?
South East London.
South East London.
South London.
Oh yes, there are bookshops there, but I haven't got an address for Peckham. But I know there's a bookshop in Peckham.
There's one in the Brixton.
But what I can do is that I can get the information and leave it here, so when you come back to your other talks, you'll be able to get them. Now I want to just recommend some very good books that you can read. Is Bringing the Black Boy to Manhood. That's by Nathan Hare, H-A-R-E, and Julia Hare, published by the Black Think Tank. Growing Up Black, a resource manual for black youth, by Makeda, M-A-K-E-D-A, Silver, S-I-L-V-E-R-A. Blacks in Science, Ancient and Modern, by Ivan van Sertema. Yeah? Her Story, Black Female Rites of Passage, by Mary Lewis. And the ISIS Papers. Now, that is, has anybody heard of the ISIS Papers? Yeah? ISIS Papers is a must for any student is a must. You must get this book. It really consolidates everything that I've been saying in here today. Yeah? And I actually saw Dr. Frances Cress Wilson speak. She hadn't been to London for a long time, earlier this year. So you must try and get that book, yeah? That's by Dr. Frances Cress Wilson, ISIS Papers. And she's got other books as well, which is equally as good. So is that okay? Any other questions?
Yeah, what about the book that's beside you?
Oh, this one. Yeah. Black Youth on the Margins. Yeah. And where you can get this book, which is not in black bookshops, is 23 New Road, Brighton, BN1 1WZ, telephone number 01273 693311. This is very good because it actually talks about young people in care, looked after children, and it gives you the criminal breakdown. Yeah. These people, I'll tell you about them. It's a research organisation, a white research organisation, and I've been actually sitting on their board for 7 years. Yeah. It was very difficult when I started, but I've been able to influence such things as this to be researched and published. But one of my achievements, and this is what I'm saying, that we all can achieve within this system, we just have to know. One of my achievements, which I'm very pleased of, and it's one of the big selling ones, is, I don't know if people have heard of the Nubian Jack game and the Nubian Jack book. It's basically a general knowledge and a game that you can play with your family at Kwanzaa, and I hope you're all going to go to a Kwanzaa event. And it's basically...
Christmas alternative.
Sorry?
They're asking what Kwanzaa is.
I'll come back to that. Who doesn't know about Kwanzaa here?
Me.
All right.
I don't know.
You need to get somebody in to talk about Kwanzaa. Yeah. Basically, I'll come to Kwanzaa in a minute. But Nubian Jacks is basically like a general knowledge game. Yeah. Similar to one of those white general knowledge games, but it's about our people. Yeah? Yes. Nubian Jacks. And this organisation, that's what I got them to do, is to get Pepper Kai, that's the brother who I've given you the number for, supplies them.
Pepper Kai.
Yeah.
Can you get that number again? Please.
PEPUKAYI books. Pepper Kai books. 0208 801.
Slow down. 0208 801
801 0205.
0205.
Yeah. When you buying that game, buy it from Pepper Kai.
Pepper Kai.
Okay. He supplies the Trust for the Study of Adolescence. It's one of their best resources they have. Now they're based in Brighton. So remember I was talking to you about resources and networks going further afield? If I wasn't sitting on that all-white research group, how would the information get to young black people in other parts of England? How would that happen? Yeah? And yeah.
My question is, it's good that you've managed to get this this so-called game out to the public.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is, within your 35 years of experience,
Yeah.
have you written some kind of program that somebody else can kind of follow in your kind of footsteps?
In my footsteps.
Yeah.
I haven't done, but I'm thinking about it, and everybody keeps asking me, why don't I do it?
Don't you think it's a good idea? Because I mean, it's good that you can come and see
You're
people like ourselves and
Yeah,
talk to us about what you're
absolutely
doing.
right.
But I mean, there are people that would like to kind of put themselves in it and actually do what you're doing.
Yeah,
And by writing it down,
yeah.
you can have
I've been asked
something
that.
to follow. you
I've
know?
been asked that many times. What I have got out there is my my book. I
You
will
have a book.
read one of my poems before I leave. My book of poetry. That's what I have out there.
Your book of poetry, does it relate to
It
your
relates
work
to
or-
everything, yeah. It's Pemberkai has that book, and it's called Lioness Chant, because I actually perform as well on stage. I've performed in Jamaica, in Paris, in Switzerland. So basically, as I said, I've gone to Oxford University, York University. I've had all audiences of white people who love the poetry, but they're just like stunned, because basically the poetry that I write, I don't compromise with it. And I feel that when you're writing, when you're coming from your aspect, I don't try to make it funny, so that, you know, I try to make it serious so that people can see that our situation is serious. So therefore, I write from a serious perspective. And I use it in schools. It's non-offensive and it's important. I've used it in my work at where I'm working with young people. So, but I take up your suggestion. I think it's a very good one.
I think so too, and I think the sooner we start writing these things down, I think the better it will be for ourselves than our people.
Absolutely.
Because we
Well,
talk
you've
about
given me food for thought.
yeah, we talk about following the white supremacist system,
Yeah.
but yet it's like none of us take the time out to actually write our own system. So therefore, we've got no choice but to follow that system.
Yeah.
You know
And
what
I
mean?
think that what you said is very true, because a lot of the writings and a lot of the work that we've done, we do have people who are based and living in England, who are born here. I wasn't born in England, but there's people who are born here. Very few of us actually write any of our own material. Most of the research and books come from the States, come from America. So all the books that I've read out to you, apart from this book, and Ravinda Bhan is an Asian woman, we haven't got our own studies, and we need to have our own studies. So I take your point, and I will think about it quite seriously. Just quickly talking about...
Sorry, I've got to make a move now, but I'd say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Nubian Jack, Book of World Faces, and they do it in cards and the game, is his name is Jack, J-A-K. His surname, middle name is B-U-B-U-E-L-A Dodd, D-O-D-D. And you can get that from Pepperkai. Yeah? Kwanzaa. I hope I'm going to do justice to it. I'm going to just say it basically, because I don't can't remember all the principles. But the first thing to know that Kwanzaa is not Christmas, right? The best way to explain Kwanzaa to you is that it's about our self-determination, it's basically giving you what you would call it, a list of things that we have to take through the next year.
I think
So,
it's 7, isn't it?
yes,
7
7.
days.
Yeah. The word Kwanzaa is a Swahili word for first fruit. Yeah. And Kwanzaa period starts from the 26th of December straight through to the 1st of January. It has 7 principles, which is called the Nguga Saba. And the first principle, I know the first and I can tell you the first one and the last one. The first principle is Umoja, which means unity. And that's what I've basically been talking about here today, really, when I talk about the village. Yeah? Umoja. Beautiful, isn't it?
In the plane.
Sorry?
There's a plane called Umoja or something.
Yes, yes. And it is about unity. And that's a good way to start the year, isn't it? Start Kwanzaa with unity. If we've not romanticized about it, but within the word unity, what does it mean to us in terms of our immediate families, the village, and the wider family outside, have a panoramic view on it, yeah? And then the last principle, because it goes like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that's why it has 7, because it's days of the week, is Imani, which means faith, yeah? And I feel that it has others like creativity and cooperative economics, self-determination. So they're all good principles, yeah? It's not based on any Christmas or anything like that celebration. It's about what, it's basically talking about everything that we've talked about this evening, yeah? And putting those things into practice, yeah? And doing that throughout the year. Like, I've got a very good advice from you about using my creativity, cooperative economics, you understand? And passing that, you know, that information out. And I think that's something I'm going to take seriously. So basically, we all can do that. For some of you, it's about getting through your degrees, whether you're in your first year or second or your third. It's about focusing and getting that. Because I know for some, just actually focusing on the work, you know, is, you know, I know what it's like. Just focusing on the work and getting an essay in and getting that. So you need to look at that, but at some time, take some time out to go to a Kwanzaa. Phone up one of those black book shops. Phone up Pepper Kai, yeah? Find out where a Kwanzaa celebration is. And please, don't feed into the Christmas business, because that is just economics. Has no faith in it, even though they say there's faith there, you understand? And don't be there thinking about who can I buy a Christmas present for and all of this kind of thing on your little grant money, and then when the time comes you don't have none. Focus on how you can strengthen yourself. That is the most important thing. Yeah? Don't even do the present thing. The present thing is not necessary. Your present to yourself this time of year is to, you know, uplift yourselves. Nourish your body with good food. Say to yourself, I am not supporting McDonald's any longer. I'm not supporting KFC any longer. That doesn't do, no, you know, support the brothers and the sisters who are cooking the kalaloo and the African suya or whatever. That is more nutritious for you.
KFC's alright.
Yeah? Brother, don't even talking to me like that. I say this is a time for us to be making our own economics. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's a time for us to be, I don't see why people have to support McDonald's and KFC. We're putting money into those, you know, pockets where we're not really doing anything for ourselves. I know it's easy to run there and get, when you're doing your essay, oh, I need something to eat. Learn to cook. Yeah, knead. You know, remember when we used to knead dumpling? Many of you probably don't get enough exercise. That is exercise in itself when you start kneading the dumpling. And it has a rhythm as well. You can think of the drum, you know what I mean? When you're doing that. You know? Go back to the yam and the cassava. You're not going to eat it every day, but eat it. You need some of that food to spiritually uplift you. Yeah? Spiritually uplift you. Yeah? And if you want to do something and you don't want to, you know, you don't have to buy a present, feed people, that's unity.